Tim has spent more than 20 years leading marketing, brand communications, growth strategy across agencies, SaaS companies, executive leadership teams. He's held both agency and in-house leadership roles, including CMO and CRO positions, which gives him a really unique perspective on how businesses grow and where marketing and leadership often disconnect. Most recently, he launched Boulder Punch, where he partners with B2B and technology companies to help bring strategic marketing leadership and alignment into growing organizations. Tim, welcome. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, likewise, Isabel. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, to speak to the audience, and to really get in deep in the details as to sort of the differences between marketing at agencies and marketing at corporate, and having that sort of dual perspective and what it really means today, especially with all the changes that and I believe fundamental changes that are impacting the broader world of marketing.
Absolutely. So like I just mentioned, you've had a really unusual career path, so
Yeah.
agency leadership, corporate TMO roles, revenue leadership, now fractional work. I mean, at this point in your career, what perspective do you have on growth that you genuinely couldn't have had if you'd only stayed in one
Oh,
lane?
yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate you acknowledging that my career path is somewhat unique. I mean, my experience is that people in marketing very often, not always, but very often, are stick to the agency path or the corporate path, and don't often you cross the streams, as they say. Yeah, and it's for no other reason often than it's just the culture of the two different types of organizations, where the some people get bored and unfulfilled working for a single brand and getting involved in the office politics of the corporate side, or other people, they may not be too excited about like the pace of an agency and having to jump around on all these different types of clients. I but after about 18 years in the agency world, both through PR and branding and advertising, where I rose to a leadership level, I wanted to try my hand on the corporate side, specifically because I wanted to see what it would be like to be like embedded in house with the rest of the executive leadership team. One of the challenges on the being an agency person is that you're always on the outside. You're looking in. You're almost like a mercenary who's hired to do a task. You do it. You can do it very successfully, but you don't always have the types of insights that you would require to know if it truly is making a difference, right? The purpose of an advertising campaign or a marketing plan is not to execute a marketing plan. It's to grow the business, right? It's to move the needle. And often I found that we didn't have the type of insights that we would need in terms of the overall corporate business strategy, and in a way that we could also speak to and influence some of the decision making right at the beginning before it got to the marketing stage. So I made that shift, and I've for about the past 12 years, I've been on the corporate side. And I can tell you that the dual perspective really does, I feel, is my superpower. Because speaking of superpowers, you can tell I'm a fan. It allows me to, I believe, cut through all the noise and some of the BS that you would you tend to get with in between the agency and the business, agency and client relationship, right? Understand where both sides are coming from, what they're really saying or what they're not asking, what the reasons are for not asking those questions, right? And using that to like I said, kind of get everybody more on the same page and to speak honestly and true with one another and get to the point, and therefore be able to truly focus on meaningful, relevant work. And it's. I mean, I rolled the dice, and it's so far so good. It's worked out for me.
I love it. That's so fascinating. And I love that you see it as a superpower because it absolutely is, like it is definitely a unique career path, but it has given you so many different perspectives to take on and create.
Yeah. Yeah, it has. And when I was on the agency side, while I personally started off in PR, I did quickly move my way up into the overall messaging and branding side, which then opened doors for me in advertising, and that involved everything from traditional TV advertising to digital and web. So I've have a lot of experience across many different tactics, and as a result, um, uh, any project or mission that I approach, I feel that I'm tactically agnostic, right? It's not like, I'm a PR guy at heart, so everything I do is going to have a PR. No, that may not work. That may not be appropriate. That may not be the right way to deliver a message to this particular audience, right? So that the working on the agency side really gave me a great perspective of the broader picture of marketing. And then when I got to the corporate side, where you understand what the business is truly trying to do, not like what's the overall business goal, not a filtered down version. By the time it gets to an agency, it allowed me to put together programs, strategies that um, had different tactics and channels and message points and triggers, right? Really based on that core strategy and the specific audience you're trying to reach, and more importantly, the nuances within that audience. And you could come up with a multi-channel, multi-tactic, multi-touch campaign where you've got a lot of levers that you're pushing. And you're also able to recognize which ones aren't working and drop them, and which ones are working and double down. And that's another thing that being a hired gun as an agency, you don't often get, because if you don't get the true feedback as to how impactful is it for the overall business, right? It doesn't matter how many clicks or how many views or how many impressions. And agencies often rely on that as the way to validate the success of a program, and can run into some friction points with the client, because that the client's not seeing business growth, but the client also isn't sharing what the business goals were with the agency, and vice versa. So again, I think that the having that holistic approach has really armed me well for basically the paradigm shift that's going on in marketing and marketing strategy today.
Yeah, I love that. That's very interesting. And like you have said that most companies don't have a marketing execution problem. They have a leadership gap.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's like a behavior you see from leadership teams that immediately tells you growth is about to stall, like even when
Sure.
the metrics are looking healthy?
Yes, that's a good question too. So, no company is ever, born fully formed, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of it's obviously there's growth stages, and there's different opportunities and challenges throughout, every step of that. And growth is never a steady line up. It's like it's step growth. Like you reach a certain plateau, you then top out. You have to
The
make
aspect of
changes, and you got to reach another plateau, and
life.
so, but the clients that I've worked with for the last 10 years are often they're B2B, they're founder led. They're not quite startups, but they're also not huge enterprises at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And in many instances, the marketing had been managed by the founder or the CEO, right? And they were able to execute some of the basic things, right? Email marketing or going to trade shows and events. They often would have a junior person or people on their team who were very, very good at different tactics, like your email marketing person, right, or your HubSpot manager, those sort of things, or they'd have an agency that they were helping them with. But inevitably, that organization is going to reach a point where those things like no longer work. The stuff that used to work no longer does, because right, they were able to it may have been the right place, the right time. They were able to address an immediate gap in the industry. They got the low hanging fruit, if you will. But now they're at a stage where either the founder is stretched too thin and they can't be sole marketing, leader, and the agency isn't as involved in the day to day to really know what's going on. And lots of times agencies, are great at executing, but are leery about giving overall business advice. Not always, but and the other people on the marketing team, like I said, are junior. They're great at one thing, but not sort of building that strategy. Um, and at that point, these companies get stuck. So they're doing marketing things, right? It's still busy, but those marketing activities are no longer the driving growth at the same rate or same percentage. And often they don't know why. Because it worked before, why isn't it working now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nothing's changed. Well, yes, it has. You're now talking to a different type of clientele. Right? Your success has put you in a place where now you're talking to bigger customers and prospects, but they likely may already have a partner or a vendor or a solution. So now you have to push that incumbent out, as opposed to working with a company that didn't have anyone and they're a little bit more desperate. So that's where I can come in, and people like me who have you know decades of experience to step in and not just give advice and give marketing consultation to the boss and then walk away. No, like, we're there to actually take over the day-to-day management of them. Like, we come up with the strategy,
Yeah.
and we collaborate with we collaborate with sales and product and the executives, but we're also there to execute it and to manage the team and to plug the gaps and ultimately to be accountable for the results.
That's a very sharp answer. And
Thank you.
like
Mhm.
when you walk into a company as a fractional CMO,
Mhm.
what's the first tension in the room that you try to identify? Is it like misalignment,
Yeah.
ego, fear?
Oh, it's all of it. I mean, oftentimes your people don't understand your role, right? Are you the new,
Mhm.
marketing director, or are you a consultant? And if you're a consultant, how long are you going to be here for? Do we need to listen to you, right? Who's this guy coming in telling us what to do, right? So there's some defensiveness that goes on there, or people get scared. They think that they're going to be fired because there's a new person in town who's because the first thing you got to do is evaluate. You evaluate the success of the program, and anytime something like that happens, people get nervous. I would get nervous. I understand that.
Yeah,
Um,
makes
yeah, and then also sometimes there's I hate to say it, but the ego of the founder, right? Where they did a great job creating a company and building a company, and they had possibly either they or one of their top people, the maybe sales, right? The head of sales was running marketing, and it was doing great until it wasn't. And even though they're acknowledging that they need somebody to come in and take it over, who has the proper experience and skills, they need to be willing to listen, and they need to be willing to let go. There's a reason why a lot of founder-led organizations, that once they reach a certain level, the founder has to step out of
yeah.
being like the choke point on all the different departments. But that can be tough because founders are very, very, entrepreneurs. They're very strong-willed. They're alpha personalities, right? They've been successful, and even if logically they're acknowledging they need someone to move, break through. That's where the name Boulder Punch comes from, by the way. Break through these barriers.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, yeah. But often it's the challenge is that they really what they want is someone to just do what they were doing, so they don't have to do it anymore,
Hmm.
but not change things. And the problem is the changes. It's really the changes need to be made because the old program isn't working anymore. The
Yeah.
market's changed. There's more competition. You're no longer the first one to market. You're no longer the trailblazer. Now people are following on that trail, and they're starting to outpace you. And so those things are critical. But there's never there's often never a single challenge. It's
Hmm.
usually a combination of many, and you
Okay.
just need to be able to identify what's the biggest, address that first, and then work your way down the list.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like you've worked with organizations at moments where the stakes were high and the
Yep.
direction maybe wasn't always like fully clear yet. So in those environments, what separates to you marketers who create clarity from marketers who add noise?
Uh, that's a really good question. So, um, it's the signs can often be again, it's specialists are having. Let me put it this way: knowing something that worked once but isn't working, like acknowledging why
Mhm.
it's not working, right? Even though you're doing the same thing, like you haven't changed, but the conditions have changed, right?
Yeah,
And often it can be a subtle change where, like when you were at this level, it made sense. Now that you're at this level, it doesn't because of
that's
the
it.
size of the market, right? So it doesn't mean that it's broken, or it doesn't mean the market changed. It just means you moved into a different market, or side, opportunity. Um, and then there's the getting locked into the mentality of we've always done it that way, right? Or listening to your peers, other businesses, other startups, other entrepreneurs who they're having success doing this tactic or that tactic, right? Oh, we get tons of new business from going to trade shows, right? Well, trade shows can be expensive. But an entrepreneur is part of a peer group, and they hear that advice. But the reality is, it's a different type of product, different type of company, different type of market, right? So that may not make any sense here. So, and often the people who are making those decisions, when there isn't a experienced hand running the marketing, like often the other people who are making those decisions don't have that background, to fall back on, to realize like, well, maybe this isn't going to be a good fit, or maybe we need to stop doing this, right? And here's the reasons why. So, and it's not because they're not intelligent or they're not successful. It's just marketing is not their thing, and you're now at a level where you need the somebody where it is their thing, and not
Yeah.
just like a really good tactician. You need a strategist.
Yeah. And like a lot of early stage SaaS companies confuse motion with
Yeah,
momentum.
yeah.
So, what's the most to you convincing, like busy marketing you've seen that produced almost no real business impact?
Email marketing,
Oh,
especially to cold prospects, where because I've seen situations where companies will just build lists, buy lists, and just keep sending out one email campaign after another. And the bigger they're going to get opportunities from it, more often than not.
yeah.
And in order to increase the number of opportunities, you just got to send out more emails to more people,
Yeah.
right? Um, but they can often do it in a way where they, even though they're not breaking any of the quote unquote spamming rules, right? And they're not being flagged as a spammer by Google and being shut down, right?
Mhm.
They're still doing it so much and so frequently and in such an obnoxious way that the prospects who don't respond immediately, you know,
Mhm.
never will. You just annoy them, right?
Yeah.
And that, and it's yes, you want to generate as many, SQLs, right? People who are ready to buy right now. You want to generate as many of those as quickly as possible, but you also want to be able to identify the MQLs, people who aren't ready to buy now but are somewhat interested, and you want to they come bring them into the funnel and then nurture those through the funnel. Well, you risk the opportunity of doing that if you don't create any MQLs, because they're not ready to buy immediately, so you're not interested in them. But instead you're just going to keep blasting them with emails and hoping that you'll get them at the right time and place. So that's probably, and it's very it may not be expensive in terms of dollars. It's expensive in terms of time and resources.
Oh, yeah.
It is because someone's got to write those emails, someone's got to set them up, someone's got to create the CRM and maintain it and measure it, and then yes, you can find AI tools that'll do a lot of that for you and automate it for you, but then it's especially in the writing of the emails, right? I think most people have gotten enough spam emails that were written by a bot that they can tell it's not sincere. That it's just a form letter, right? And AI, in my opinion, unless you have an actual copywriter managing the AI copy, but my opinion is that even though AI can generate copy for these email marketing and sales emails, it really does read like a junior level copywriter. It's very sort of amateur.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times, businesses that rely solely on email marketing or largely on email marketing, they don't care about that. They just want to get more emails out.
Yeah.
And it's not about connecting. It's like connecting isn't the person on the other end opening the. That's not a connection. Connection is them reading what it says and being interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love
Mhm.
the way you framed that. And like
Thank you.
you have built marketing systems in across industries that operate with very different like emotional realities,
Yeah.
automotive, wellness,
Yep.
fintech, political campaigns. Like, do you
Hmm.
think great marketing strategy changes dramatically by industry, or like are people overcomplicating? Like, what's your take?
They overcomplicate. I mean,
Mhm.
this is a overused term and a bit of a cliche, but I believe it. It's about winning hearts and minds, right?
Oh, I love
It's
that.
appealing to your audience either on a logical basis or on an emotional basis.
Yeah.
Sometimes both, all right? And sometimes the same audience, there's going to be subsets that'll be, attractive to the logical pitch, where another group for the same company is attracted to the emotional pitch.
Yeah.
All right. And it's all the tools and channels and technologies that are out there to reach those people. Those are the means to the end, but not the end. Um, I truly believe that any effective marketing program, the fundamentals are knowing your audience, knowing what keeps them up at night, what are their goals, what are their concerns, and being able to position yourself as the solution or provider of those solutions or those hopes, right? That is, and to do it in a way that is, like I said, it's going to appeal to one, your heart, your head, or your heart. Um, the that's what's going to make a difference. And then the tactics that you use, the marketing tactics that you use, that varies based on that audience and where they
Mhm.
get their information. And it's are they, do they get it through webinars? Do they go to trade shows? Are they looking? They get it from social media? Like that's part of the whole audience persona identification building. But again, it really comes back to not what you want to say and what you want to sell. It's what the person you're trying to reach needs.
It's fascinating to me, sort of the psychology that goes behind all of this.
It is. I mean, some of the best marketers I've worked with have some sort of psychological or psychiatry background, right? Or it's something that at least interests them. Because again, we're trying to influence people. We're trying to influence them to do something they normally wouldn't do, which is spend money. And to spend money with you, not the 12 other companies that are offering the same thing. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like I just spoke yesterday with this agency that uses like this, like I don't know the word that she used, but she like investigated the psychology about the audience. Like it was so
Yeah.
interesting to me. It's just
Yeah, and there's a process to. I see the one thing I've kind of related back to one of your earlier questions about some of the challenges when I go into an organization that is
mm,
hit that barrier and needs to break through, or they're at a transition point. Often you'll talk to the CEO or the founder, or and you'll like ask them, like, what's your message, like what's your core message, what's your positioning, right? And more importantly, like, does everybody in your organization agree with that? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all know exactly who we are and what we're doing, and we're great at that. But then you go and talk to each of the individuals and they all have a completely different
mm,
version of that same idea. And then when you get into, say, like, if marketing and sales have two slightly different versions of what the core message is, there's a disconnect. Then if you talk to the individual sales reps and you find out that each one of them has their own spin on the core message, and it's often based on their selling style or where, the types of customers they talk to, who, and they had the most success with pitching this version versus that. So, and you find out that the messaging is really all over the place. Now, imagine you're a customer, getting those messages from different touch points. It's confusing, and then they
absolutely.
don't understand why they want to work with. So it's that is critical. Understanding your audience and understanding, like, it's not about what you want to pitch them and all your bells and whistles and features and the bips and blips and the technology. It's about, like, what are the problems that you solve, what are the goals that you accomplish for your customer, and then you come up with a version of that that is appropriate for sales, for marketing, for customer support, and et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And
Yep.
like you talk a lot about ownership and accountability tied to business outcomes. Do you think modern marketing culture has become like too obsessed with attribution and dashboards at the
Yeah.
expense of like judgment and intuition?
Yes. Yes. So I think. I mean, look. Most of the. I've always been fascinated by new technology. I mean, throughout the majority of my career, I was always the tech guy. Meaning, like I ran when I was at the PR shop. I ran the tech portfolio. When I had my brand agency, we specialized in different technologies, and now that I'm a fractional, I work with different types of technology businesses. So I am not a troglodyte. I do embrace technology, but but if you become too reliant on the technology to the point where it's no longer a tool, but you're letting it like make decisions for you, you're getting dumber, right? You know, because the, you're not learning what's working and what isn't, right? You don't develop those instincts. You don't develop that sixth sense,
Mhm.
because you're relying on something else to do it. Perfect example, right? Imagine if your business was run the way you drive your car with a GPS, right?
Mhm.
Or your Google Maps, right? You use the technology to plot your drive your route for you. When you're going somewhere, right? But then, God forbid, if that ever breaks, how would you get there without it? Do you know how to read a map, right? Do you
I
actually
always
pay
think of
attention to the street names, right? That along your route, or are you just like going like turning where it tells you to turn, right? So imagine if your business was run the same way with technology, where you rely too heavily on AI or a dashboard or an automated CRM system, and it's great when it's giving you insights and directions and it's creating efficiencies, but but you need to be able to make the final decision yourself, not let the tools make the decision for you and you're just like okaying them.
Oh my God, that was
Yeah.
such a great example. I
Oh,
always, because I'm so bad
yeah.
with directions, and I always think about like what would have been my life if I grew up without
Yeah. Yeah.
a GPS, Waze, Google Maps.
Exactly. And I'm the same way. I mean, I use it all the time too. And
And
it's just like,
but
yeah,
I
yeah,
think about the people who didn't grow up with these tools
yeah.
and that they had that skill like completely developed. Just
Yep.
read a map and get to the destination. Like that's truly inconceivable to me. Truly,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. How would you
Yeah,
get home if your GPS didn't work and you were somewhere unfamiliar, right? The
yeah.
yeah,
That's such a good
yeah,
example because you have
yeah,
no idea how much like or sometimes Waze betrays me and I'm like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
lost and I'm just like crying in my
Hmm.
car. And I just
Hmm.
think about
Yeah,
all the generation that existed before this and just how crazy it is to me that it was just something
yeah.
skill
Yeah,
that
and
they
it's
had.
not just in business. I mean, it's not. And again, I'm not an opponent of AI. I mean, first of all, it's here to stay, but I think it's still, being evaluated as like the right way to use it. But I can tell you right now, I've got two children in school, and they're very smart. They get great grades, but I know that they and their classmates are relying way too much on AI, on ChatGTP to, help them, with their research. But we all know that ChatGTP is hallucinates and it gives you like false positives and if you don't have your own instinct and your own sixth sense and your own ability to figure things out for your own and you rely solely on what the technology is telling you is correct, you, you're not going to develop those skills later in life when you really do truly need them.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That
Yeah.
was so good.
Yeah, well, I mean, and kind of one last point along those lines, and this is another lesson I learned, and I try to express to my children, even in the people that I work with and people that work for me. You learn more from your mistakes than you do your successes. If everything seems to go perfectly and everything is a win, and you don't know adversity, and you aren't challenged with trying to figure it out a different way, you won't be able to when the time comes. Whereas if you make a mistake or something doesn't go the way that you plan it to go, that actually builds the muscles up, in you to be able to figure it out, to overcome challenges and diversity and when things aren't working. And I think that also that's relevant to what we were talking about, where like being too reliant on technology where it's easy or easier. What happens when it's no longer available, or what happens when it's not, meeting expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. That very powerful statement.
Cool.
Tim, like this was such a great conversation. I really appreciate you bringing so much perspective and honesty and experience into this discussion. I think you have such an interesting lens on marketing because you don't just think about campaigns or execution. Like you think deeply about people and organizations and leadership and how businesses operate beneath the surface. And I think that came through so clearly today.
Awesome.
And I'm genuinely excited to see what you continue to build and grow with Boulder Punch. I have a feeling like that this next chapter is going to be a really great one. So thank you again, truly, for coming with us today.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I doubly appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to you. These were great. It was a great conversation. I'm glad you got something out of it. And I really do hope that your audience also gets, a little bit of insights out of it that help them on their journey to success.
Absolutely. I have no doubt.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.